Commander Zaxif's claws clicked against the control panel of his flagship as he watched the final moments of New Haven Colony through the tactical display. The human settlement burned beautifully, its pathetic defensive grid flickering out like dying stars. Orange flames danced across residential districts where families had been sleeping just hours before. Target eliminated, Commander, reported his weapons officer, a younger Krillian whose scales still held their juvenile shimmer. Estimated casualty count, 47,000 humans. Zaxif's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Krillian Empire had finally taken decisive action against humanity's expansion into contested space. For decades, these pink-skinned mammals have been spreading like a plague across the galaxy, establishing colonies on worlds that rightfully belonged to superior species. Their technology was laughably primitive, their military scattered across hundreds of star systems, and their resolve weak. Excellent work, Lieutenant Vash. Signal the fleet to move to the next target. The agricultural world of Terra Verde should provide even more spectacular fireworks. The bridge crew worked with efficient precision as the Krillian War fleet adjusted course. 57 massive dreadnoughts and over 200 escort vessels moved through space like a school of metallic predators. Each ship bore the crimson sigil of the Empire, a mark that struck fear into lesser civilizations across 12 sectors. Admiral Korthak materialized on the bridge via hologram, his ancient scarred hide a testament to centuries of conquest. The old warrior's eyes glowed with approval as he reviewed the tactical reports. Outstanding work, Zaxif. The destruction of New Haven will send the proper message to these human insects. How long until you reach Terra Verde? 18 hours at current speed, Admiral. Our intelligence suggests minimal orbital defenses. The colony houses roughly 80,000 humans, mostly farmers and their spawn. Korthak's laugh was like grinding metal. Farmers. How fitting that we harvest them instead. The Galactic Council will take notice when we present them with the ashes of human ambition. Perhaps other species will remember their place. As the transmission ended, Zaxif allowed himself a moment of pride. His career had been built on decisive victories against inferior opponents. The insectoid Zephyrians had crumbled in mere weeks. The crystalline shardlings had surrendered after losing just 3 worlds. Humans would be no different, despite their annoying tendency to spread across so many systems. Commander, incoming transmission from Terra Verde, announced the communications officer. It appears to be from their planetary governor. Put it through. Let's hear them beg. The main screen flickered, revealing a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and tired eyes. Governor Sarah Chun wore the simple blue uniform of the Colonial Administrative Service, but her bearing suggested military experience. Krillian vessels. This is Governor Chun of Terra Verde. We know what you did to New Haven. We've evacuated our civilians to underground shelters, but we won't run. This colony represents the hopes and dreams of thousands of families who came here seeking a peaceful life. Zaxif's mandibles clicked with amusement. Governor Chun, I am Commander Zaxif of the Krillian Imperial Fleet. Your people trespass on worlds that don't belong to them. We are simply cleaning house. These worlds were uninhabited when we arrived. We've harmed no one, threatened no one. We're farmers, teachers, engineers who try to build something better for our children. Your children are irrelevant. Your species is irrelevant. You have exactly 1 hour to evacuate your underground shelters and face judgment in the open. Hiding like vermin will only make their deaths more painful. Governor Chin's expression hardened. Then, you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with, Commander. Humans don't break easily. And when you hurt our children, she paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. When you hurt our children, you discover what we're really capable of. The transmission ended abruptly. Zaxif stared at the blank screen for several moments, a strange chill running down his spine despite the bridge's warm temperature. There had been something in the human's eyes, something that reminded him of the look predators gave prey they intended to devour slowly. He shook off the feeling. Humans were weak, emotional creatures. Their threats meant nothing against superior Krillian technology and discipline. Maintain course, he ordered. Prepare bombardment protocols. I want Terra Verde reduced to molten glass within 6 hours of our arrival. Meanwhile, in a heavily shielded communication center beneath Terra Verde's capital, Governor Chun worked frantically at a quantum entanglement transmitter. Her fingers flew across the controls as she established connections to dozens of star systems simultaneously. The quantum link bypassed normal space-time limitations, allowing instantaneous communication across vast distances. Emergency Protocol 7, she spoke into the transmitter. This is Governor Sarah Chun, Terra Verde Colony, Sector 7 Alpha. Krillian forces have destroyed New Haven with all hands. Estimated 47,000 civilian casualties, including children. Krillian fleet approaching our position. Request immediate implementation of Articles of War. Responses flooded in from across human space. Military commanders, colonial governors, and fleet admirals all acknowledged the transmission with grim determination. Within minutes, the quantum network carried Chin's message to every human world, every ship, every outpost scattered across the galaxy. On Luna Base, Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the Strategic Command Center studying holographic displays of human forces scattered across dozens of sectors. His staff worked with quiet efficiency, updating fleet positions and readiness reports in real time. "Sir, we're receiving confirmation from all major fleet groups," reported his chief of staff. "The Third Fleet is already moving to intercept Krillian forces in Sector 7. The Fifth and Eighth Fleets are converging on Krillian space. All colonial militias are activating." Webb nodded slowly. For 30 years, humanity had maintained a carefully crafted image of weakness and disorganization. Their colonies appeared lightly defended, their fleets seemed scattered and uncoordinated, and their technology looked generations behind other galactic powers. It had been a massive deception, one that required incredible discipline and sacrifice to maintain. "Signal all commands," Webb said quietly. "Operation Dragon's Wake is now active. Release all restrictions on classified technology. Authorize use of Category 5 weapons systems. Rules of engagement are weapons-free against all Krillian assets. Sir, should we attempt to warn the Krillians? Offer them a chance to withdraw." Webb turned to look at images from New Haven still playing on the tactical displays. Residential blocks reduced to ash. Schools and hospitals deliberately targeted. Children's playgrounds transformed into craters. No warnings, Colonel. They made their choice when they decided to murder sleeping families. Now, they get to learn what happens when you mistake human restraint for weakness. Back on the Krillian flagship, Commander Zaxith was reviewing final bombardment plans when his sensor officer suddenly stiffened. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. It appears multiple fleets are changing course toward our position." "Define multiple fleets, Lieutenant." "Sir, I count at least 30 separate task forces, each containing between 50 and 200 vessels. They're moving at speeds our intelligence reports suggested were impossible for human ships." Zaxith felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. "That's impossible. Human fleets are small, scattered defensive forces. They lack the industrial capacity for major fleet operations." "Commander," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from an approaching human fleet. They're identifying themselves as the 3rd Expeditionary Force under Admiral Jackson." "Put it through." The screen revealed a grizzled human male wearing a black uniform adorned with more medals than Zaxith had ever seen on a single individual. Admiral Rebecca Jackson's scarred face spoke of decades of combat experience, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a born predator. "Commander Zaxith of the Krillian Imperial Fleet, I am Admiral Jackson. You have one opportunity to surrender unconditionally and submit to war crimes tribunals. You have murdered 47,000 civilians, including over 12,000 children." Zaxith struggled to maintain his composure. Admiral Jackson, you are in no position to make demands. The Krillian Empire commands the most powerful fleet in this sector of the galaxy. Jackson's smile was absolutely terrifying. Commander, let me explain something about human nature. We are not the peaceful farmers and merchants you think we are. We are descendants of creatures who survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and every catastrophe our planet could throw at us. We are the species that looked at the most dangerous predators on our world and decided to make them into pets. Your threats mean nothing. Krillian technology is superior to— Commander, Jackson interrupted. 30 minutes ago, every human colony in the galaxy went to Condition 1. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we've been hiding for 3 decades is now moving toward Krillian space. You killed our children, Commander. You woke the dragon. The transmission ended, leaving Zaxith staring at a blank screen while alarms began sounding throughout his ship. Sensor reports flooded in describing impossible things. Human vessels moving at velocities that should have been impossible, energy signatures that dwarfed anything in Krillian databases, and weapon systems that appeared to violate known physics. Commander, his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic. Long-range sensors are detecting the approach of a massive human fleet. Current count is over 300 vessels, and they're still coming. Estimated time to weapons range: 4 hours. Zaxith stood frozen as the reality of his situation became clear. The easy conquest he had expected was transforming into something else entirely. Something that made his predatory instincts scream danger with every fiber of his being. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zaxith began to understand what true fear felt like. Admiral Rebecca Jackson stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display as her fleet approached the Krillian formation. 347 human warships moved through space with predatory grace, their hulls gleaming with adaptive armor that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. These weren't the outdated vessels the galaxy had grown accustomed to seeing from humanity. Admiral, we have target lock on all enemy vessels, reported Commander Sarah Okafor, her tactical officer. All ships report ready for combat operations. Jackson nodded, her attention focused on the lead Krillian dreadnought visible on the main screen. Somewhere on that ship was Commander Zaxith, the alien who had ordered the murder of children while they slept. The thought made her jaw clench, but her voice remained steady. Signal the fleet. Imprimant formation Omega. I want every Krillian ship isolated and unable to support its neighbors. This isn't going to be a battle, Commander. This is going to be an execution. The human fleet suddenly dispersed across 3 dimensions, ships diving above and below the plane of space while others accelerated to flanking positions. Advanced AI systems coordinated movements with precision impossible for biological crews alone, creating a shifting net of firepower that surrounded the Krillian formation. Aboard the Krillian flagship, Commander Zaxith watched in growing horror as human vessels performed maneuvers his experts had declared impossible. Ships accelerated and decelerated at rates that should have turned their crews into paste, made turns so sharp they violated basic physics, and maintained formations so precise they seemed to be controlled by a single mind. How are they moving like that? He demanded. Our intelligence reports indicated human ships could barely maintain 0.7 light speed. Lieutenant Vash worked frantically at his console, trying to make sense of the sensor readings. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from their engines. It appears they're using some form of controlled gravity manipulation. And Commander, their ships are showing almost no life signs. What do you mean, no life signs? Sir, it appears most of their vessels are operating with skeleton crews, possibly as few as 10 to 20 beings per ship. The rest of their operations appear to be automated. Zaxith felt his blood turn to ice water. Automated warships operating at the edge of AI consciousness represented technology decades beyond Krillian capabilities. If humans had been hiding this level of advancement. Incoming transmission from the human flagship, his communications officer announced. Admiral Jackson's face appeared on screen, and Zaxith was struck by the complete absence of emotion in her expression. She looked at him the way a scientist might examine an interesting, but ultimately disposable specimen. Commander Zaxith, you now have approximately 6 minutes before my fleet opens fire. I'm offering you this time to consider the magnitude of your error. Admiral Jackson, surely we can negotiate. Negotiate? Jackson's eyebrow raised slightly. Commander, let me share something with you. Before I received this assignment, I was Director of Advanced Weapons Development at Luna Base. Do you know what my specialty was? Zaxith remained silent, sensing a trap in the question. I design weapons systems specifically for use against technologically superior opponents. For 30 years, I've been working under the assumption that humanity would eventually face enemies with better ships, better shields, and better weapons. So I created equalizers. Jackson gestured, and the screen split to show technical readouts that made Zaxith's tactical officer gasp in recognition. Quantum cascade torpedoes that phase shift through conventional shielding. Gravitic mines that create localized singularities. Plasma lances that maintain coherence across distances previously thought impossible. And my personal favorite, nanite swarms that treat enemy hulls like particularly nutritious meals. That's impossible. Such weapons would be war crimes under Galactic Convention. The Galactic Convention, Jackson interrupted coldly, became irrelevant the moment you decided to target civilian populations. You want to play by rules of total warfare? Congratulations, Commander. You just met the species that wrote the manual. The transmission ended, leaving Zaxith staring at technical specifications that represented his worst nightmares made real. Around him, his bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency to prepare their defenses, but they all knew they were facing technology beyond their comprehension. Sir, his weapons officer reported, the humans are launching something. Sensors can barely track them. On the tactical display, thousands of tiny objects streamed from the human fleet toward the Krillian formation. They moved erratically, dodging and weaving through space like living creatures rather than missiles or drones. Point defenses full spread. Zaxith ordered. Destroy those projectiles before they reach us. Krillian ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and explosive rounds filled space with deadly light, creating a wall of destruction between the two fleets. For a moment, Zaxith allowed himself to hope as dozens of human projectiles vanished in brilliant explosions. Then, the remaining objects began to change. What had appeared to be simple missiles suddenly unfolded like metallic flowers, revealing complex internal structures that defied easy classification. They moved with impossible agility, dodging defensive fire while accelerating to attack speed. Some split into multiple smaller units. Others grew larger by absorbing debris from destroyed companions. Sir, those aren't missiles, Lieutenant Vash reported with barely controlled panic. There's some kind of adaptive technology. They're learning from our defensive patterns and adjusting accordingly. The first wave of human weapons reached the Krillian outer screen, and the results exceeded even Admiral Jackson's expectations. Quantum cascade torpedoes phased through energy shields as if they didn't exist, detonating inside ship hulls with devastating effect. Gravitic mines created pocket singularities that twisted metal and flesh alike into impossible configurations. Nanite swarms swarmed across ship hulls, converting armor plating into raw materials for self-replication. The Krillian escort, vessel-dominant, Fong simply ceased to exist, its atoms scattered across several light seconds of space by a direct hit from a quantum cascade torpedo. The destroyer Razor's Edge folded in on itself as a gravitic mine activated inside its engineering section, creating a brief star that illuminated surrounding ships before winking out. "Shields at 20%, shouted the engineering officer aboard Zaxith's flagship. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Nanite contamination spreading through the outer hull. Zaxith watched his carefully organized fleet dissolve into chaos as human weapons tore through Krillian defenses like claws through paper. Ships that had seemed invincible hours before now burned and died in the cold vacuum, their crews' final communications filling the tactical net with screams of terror and pain. "All ships, full retreat," he ordered, his voice cracking with strain. "Signal the Empire. Inform Admiral Korthak that we require immediate reinforcement." But as the Krillian fleet attempted to withdraw, they discovered another terrifying aspect of human tactical doctrine. The seemingly scattered human formation had been carefully positioning itself to prevent exactly this maneuver. Every escape route was blocked by clusters of human vessels whose weapons locked onto fleeing Krillian ships with predatory precision. The light cruiser Swift Vengeance managed to break free from the main engagement, its captain pushing engines past safety limits in a desperate attempt to reach the hyperspace jump point. For a moment, it seemed the ship might escape to carry word of the disaster back to Krillian space. Then, a single human vessel appeared directly in its path. The ship was unlike anything in the Krillian databases, sleek and angular with surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. It moved with fluid grace, positioning itself between the cruiser and freedom like a predator cutting off wounded prey. Captain THYSS of the Swift Vengeance had earned his rank through 30 years of combat experience, but he had never seen anything as terrifying as this single human warship that dared to challenge his cruiser alone. "All weapons, fire at will," he ordered. Energy beams and missile salvos streaked toward the human ship, enough firepower to vaporize a city. The alien vessel didn't even attempt to dodge, simply allowing the attacks to strike its hull directly. The weapons had no effect whatsoever. Energy beams struck the ship's hull and simply vanished, absorbed by some form of adaptive shielding that treated Krillian weapons like gentle rain. Missiles detonated harmlessly against barriers that appeared and disappeared as needed, creating brilliant fireworks that illuminated the human vessel's completely undamaged hull. "Impossible," Captain THYSS whispered. "No ship can be that well defended." The human vessel moved closer, and THYSS realized with growing horror that it wasn't even fighting back. It was simply demonstrating its complete immunity to Krillian weapons, like a teacher showing students the futility of their efforts. "Captain," his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." The main screen activated, revealing a human figure unlike the others THYSS had encountered. This one appeared younger, perhaps in his 30s, with bright green eyes that held an intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. When he spoke, his voice carried the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather. "Captain THYSS of the Swift Vengeance. I'm Lieutenant Commander David Park of the UES Nemesis. I see you try to leave our little gathering. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Human, my ship has done nothing to your civilians. Allow us to withdraw, and we will carry word of your victory back to our leaders." Park's smile was genuinely friendly, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying than threats would have been. "Oh, Captain, I think you misunderstand the situation. You see the ship you're on? It participated in the bombardment of New Haven. Our records show your weapons officer fired 17 shots into the residential district, killed a family of 6, including twins who were celebrating their 8th birthday." Captain THYSS felt his stomach drop. That was not my decision. I follow orders." "I understand completely, Captain. Following orders is important in military service, which is why I'm following my orders now." Park's expression didn't change, but something cold and predatory entered his eyes. "My orders are to ensure that no ship involved in the massacre of New Haven survives to threaten human civilians again." The transmission ended, and Captain THYSS watched in fascination and terror as the human ship began to transform. What had appeared to be a conventional warship suddenly unfolded like a flower of death, revealing weapon systems that belonged in science fiction rather than reality. The Nemesis fired once. The Swift Vengeance and Everything aboard it simply stopped existing, converted into component atoms by technology that treated matter like a temporary arrangement that could be easily rearranged. Throughout the engagement zone, similar scenes played out as human forces methodically eliminated every Krillian vessel. No quarter was asked for, and none was given. Ships that surrendered were destroyed just as efficiently as those that fought to the end. Admiral Jackson watched the tactical display as the last Krillian vessel disappeared in a brief flash of light. 347 human ships remained fully operational. 57 Krillian dreadnoughts and over 200 escort vessels have been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The battle had lasted exactly 43 minutes. Admiral Korthak stood in the command center of the Krillian Empire's greatest fortress, studying reports that defied all logic and military doctrine. The massive orbital station above Krillos Prime represented centuries of engineering excellence, bristling with enough firepower to reduce entire planets to ash. Its shields could withstand supernova-level energy outputs, and its defensive fleet included over 2,000 of the Empire's finest warships. None of that made him feel remotely secure. "Repeat your report, Commander Neff," he ordered, his voice carefully controlled despite the growing dread in his chest. The younger officer's scales had lost their natural luster, turning the dull gray that indicated extreme stress in Krillian physiology. "Sir, we've lost contact with all 7-sector fleets dispatched to deal with the human problem. That's over 1,500 ships, including our most advanced dreadnoughts." "Lost contact how? Equipment failure? Communication jamming?" "Sir, we believe they were destroyed. Our long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures consistent with fleet-scale combat operations, followed by nothing. Complete radio silence from areas that should contain active military operations." Korthak's claws scraped against the metal console as he processed this information. 1,500 ships represented nearly a quarter of the Empire's total military strength. The idea that humans could have destroyed such a force was not just impossible, it was insane. What about our intelligence networks? Surely our agents in human space can provide some explanation for these events. Commander Neff's expression grew even more grim. "Sir, we've also lost contact with all deep cover operatives in human territory. Last reports indicated massive military mobilization, but nothing specific about capabilities or intentions. Show me the sensor data from the Terra Verde engagement." The main holographic display shifted, showing the reconstructed timeline of Commander Zaxitha's final battle. Korthak watched in stunned silence as human forces demonstrated technology that violated everything he thought he knew about galactic military capabilities. Ships that moved faster than physics should allow. Weapons that ignored conventional defensive systems. Tactical coordination that suggested either impossible training or artificial intelligence beyond anything in Krillian experience. And, most disturbing of all, the complete absence of survivors or wreckage that could be analyzed for weaknesses. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from outside the system. It's from a human fleet." Korthak felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. Human forces had never penetrated this deeply into Krillian space. The idea that they could have reached the Empire's capital system without detection was terrifying beyond measure. "How many ships?" "Sir, long-range sensors are still counting, but current estimates suggest over 2,000 vessels approaching from multiple vectors. They'll reach weapons range in approximately 6 hours. 2,000 ships. The humans had brought a force larger than the entire Krillian home fleet to their capital system. Korthak's mind reeled as he tried to understand the implications. If humanity possessed this level of military strength, why had they allowed themselves to appear weak for so many decades? "Put the transmission through." The holographic display shifted, revealing a human female whose appearance immediately commanded attention. She appeared to be in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that held the absolute confidence of someone accustomed to giving orders that shaped the fate of worlds. Her black uniform bore insignia that Korthak's intelligence databases identified as indicating Supreme Fleet Command. Admiral Korthak of the Krillian Imperial Fleet, I am Admiral Elena Vasquez, Supreme Commander of Human Military Forces. I'm transmitting to inform you of the terms under which your species will surrender. Korthak's mandibles clicked involuntarily. Admiral Vasquez, I believe you misunderstand the situation. You are addressing the primary military installation of an empire that has dominated this sector for over 3 centuries. Admiral Korthak, I am addressing the military commander of a species that made the catastrophic error of targeting human civilians. Your empire's 3-century run of dominance ended the moment your forces murdered children in their sleep. Admiral Vasquez gestured, and the display split to show tactical information that made Korthak's engineering staff gasp in recognition. Detailed schematics of Krillian defensive systems, ship specifications, and strategic installations filled the screen with accuracy that suggested decades of intelligence gathering. As you can see, Admiral, we know everything about your military capabilities. Ship classes, weapon systems, defensive installations, fleet disposition, supply lines, and command structures. We've been preparing for this day since first contact with your species 37 years ago. That's impossible. Your security protocols, Vasquez interrupted with what might have been amusement, were designed by a species that thinks in terms of conventional espionage. You never considered the possibility that we might infiltrate your computer networks at the quantum level, or that our artificial intelligences might be sophisticated enough to predict your tactical decisions with 97% accuracy. Korthak stared at the human admiral, beginning to understand the true scope of his species' predicament. What exactly are you saying, Admiral? I'm saying, Admiral Korthak, that humanity has been conducting a 30-year intelligence operation against every major galactic power simultaneously. We've mapped your technology, analyzed your tactics, studied your psychology, and prepared countermeasures for every possible scenario. The weak, scattered colonies you've been attacking were bait in the largest strategic deception in galactic history. The display shifted again, showing the true scope of human military deployment across the galaxy. Thousands of ships moved through space with coordinated precision, surrounding not just Krillian territory, but the home systems of every major power that had ever threatened human interests. This is insane, Korthak whispered. The resources required for such an operation would bankrupt a dozen civilizations. Admiral, let me explain something about human industrial capacity. When we left our home system, we didn't just build colonies. We built automated manufacturing centers, self-replicating construction systems, and resource extraction networks that operate independently of biological oversight. Every asteroid belt, every gas giant, every marginally habitable world in human space has been converted into industrial infrastructure. Admiral Vasquez paused, allowing this information to sink in. We've been building a military-industrial complex on a galactic scale for 3 decades, Admiral. The ships approaching your system represent less than 15% of our total military strength. Korthak felt the deck seem to shift beneath his feet as the implications became clear. If humans had been hiding this level of capability while maintaining the appearance of weakness, it suggested strategic thinking on a timescale that dwarfed normal military planning. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why reveal this now? Because you crossed the line, Admiral. Humanity operates under very simple rules when it comes to warfare. We avoid conflict when possible. We prefer negotiation and trade to military action. We're willing to appear weak if it means maintaining peace. Vasquez's expression hardened into something that made Korthak's predatory instincts scream warnings. But when someone targets our children, those rules stop applying. What are your terms? Unconditional surrender of all Krillian military forces. Dismantling of your empire's military infrastructure. War crimes trials for every officer involved in attacks on civilian targets. Reparations to human colonies that will be determined by independent tribunal. And immediate cessation of all aggressive actions against any species. Korthak's mind raced as he considered alternatives. The fortress around him represented the pinnacle of Krillian military engineering. Its shields could theoretically withstand anything in the galactic arsenal. Its weapons could destroy entire fleets. Surely some form of resistance was possible. And if we refuse these terms? Admiral Vasquez's smile was absolutely terrifying in its complete lack of malice. She looked at him with the casual indifference of someone discussing an inevitable natural phenomenon. Then, Admiral Korthak, you discover what happens when a species that survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and global wars decides that diplomacy is no longer an option. The transmission ended, leaving Korthak alone with his staff and the crushing weight of impossible decisions. Around him, officers worked frantically to prepare defenses that they all suspected would prove inadequate against technology they couldn't understand. Sir, the sensor officer reported, the human fleet is beginning deployment. They're surrounding us completely. Above, below, and on all sides. Some of their ships appear to be positioning themselves inside the gravity well. Inside the gravity well? That's impossible. No ship can maintain position that close to a planetary mass. Sir, sensors indicate they're using some form of gravitational manipulation to maintain stable orbits at distances that should result in immediate impact with the planet's surface. Korthak moved to the main display, studying tactical information that challenged everything he thought he knew about space warfare. Human ships moved through gravitational fields like submarines navigating ocean currents, positioning themselves for attacks that would come from angles Krillian defenses had never been designed to counter. Admiral, the communications officer announced, we're receiving additional transmissions from human forces. It appears individual ship captains are addressing specific fortress installations. Put them through. The main screen divided into multiple smaller displays, each showing a different human commander. Men and women of various ages and backgrounds, united only by their expressions of absolute professional competence and their obvious familiarity with Krillian defensive systems. Admiral Korthak, a young human male whose insignia identified him as a captain. This is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Retribution. I'm addressing the crew of Defense Platform 7. Your installation houses approximately 12,000 personnel, including civilian technical staff and their families. Another human, an older woman with lieutenant commander stripes, continued the briefing. Admiral, this is Commander Singh of the UES Inevitable. Defense Platform 7's main reactor will achieve critical overload in approximately 17 minutes unless emergency shutdown procedures are initiated immediately. A third human, whose youthful appearance contrasted sharply with the cold calculation in his eyes, added his own information. Admiral, this is Lieutenant Park of the UES Nemesis. We've identified the command codes necessary to initiate emergency evacuation of Defense Platform 7. These codes will be transmitted to your communications officer in 30 seconds. Korthak stared at the displays, trying to process what he was seeing. The humans weren't just threatening his installations. They were providing detailed technical information about how to minimize casualties during the installation's destruction. They knew more about Krillian defensive systems than the Krillians themselves, and they were offering mercy to enemy personnel even as they prepared to demolish everything the Empire had built. This is psychological warfare, he said, more to convince himself than to inform his staff. Sir, his chief engineer reported, I'm analyzing the technical data they transmitted. It's completely accurate. They know details about our reactor systems that should be classified above our security clearance level. How was that possible? Sir, I don't know. But if their information is correct, Platform 7's reactor is indeed approaching critical overload. Emergency shutdown procedures should be initiated immediately. Korthak found himself faced with a choice that crystallized the entire situation. He could maintain his defenses and watch thousands of his own personnel die from technical failures the humans had somehow induced, or he could follow enemy instructions to save lives while simultaneously demonstrating his complete helplessness. "Initiate emergency shutdown of Platform 7, he ordered quietly. "Signal all installations to begin evacuation procedures." As Krillian forces worked frantically to save themselves from technical disasters they didn't understand, Admiral Korthak finally grasped the true nature of humanity's strategy. This wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was a demonstration of such overwhelming superiority that resistance became not just futile, but actively counterproductive. The humans had spent 3 decades studying every aspect of Krillian civilization, technology, and military doctrine. They knew how to shut down Krillian reactors, how to override Krillian security systems, and how to predict Krillian tactical responses with mathematical precision. They had effectively conquered the Krillian Empire before firing a single shot. "Admiral," the communications officer announced, "Admiral Vasquez is requesting your response to her terms." Korthak looked around his command center, seeing the faces of officers who had served the Empire with distinction for decades. These weren't monsters or criminals. They were soldiers who had followed orders and found themselves on the wrong side of a conflict they couldn't possibly win. "Signal Admiral Vasquez," he said finally. "The Krillian Empire surrenders unconditionally." As his words echoed through the command center, Korthak realized that this moment would be remembered as the day a galactic empire learned that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology, their ships, or their weapons. It had been their patience, their willingness to appear weak while quietly becoming strong enough to reshape the galaxy according to their own moral standards. The dragon had indeed awakened, and its first lesson to the galaxy was simple. Those who threaten human children discover what 3 billion years of evolution can accomplish when guided by intelligence, determination, and an absolute refusal to allow evil to triumph through superior firepower.